Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. It was an ordinary afternoon in an upscale part of town. In an elegant cafe, decorated with white walls and touches of gold, a black woman entered, dressed in an impeccable suit. Her name was Olivia Harper, a woman who was both respected and powerful in her field, but at that moment, no one in the cafe knew it. Two men behind the counter, Jason and Mark, longtime employees, displayed their contempt the moment they saw her. Without provocation, they began speaking to her condescendingly, hurling humiliating remarks at her about her appearance, her accent, and even the way she walked. The other customers, shocked but powerless, watched the scene unfold. Olivia remained calm, her eyes betraying a suppressed anger, but she knew that acting with dignity would be her greatest strength. As the humiliation reached its peak, Olivia pulled out her phone with a discreet smile and made a call. The men assumed it was to complain, but the voice that echoed on the other end of the line changed everything. She had called her husband, Alexander Harper, an influential and respected businessman whose reputation was known throughout the city. A few minutes later, the situation completely reversed. Jason and Mark, stunned, saw their careers and credibility crumble in moments as Alexander appeared at the entrance of the cafe. Olivia, ever calm, had transformed the humiliation into a lesson in strength and dignity. This day, which had begun as a simple verbal assault, would go around the neighborhood and leave an indelible mark on the minds of those who had thought they could humiliate someone with impunity. The sun shone faintly behind the glass buildings of the city center, casting reflections on the pristine sidewalk. Olivia Harper, in her perfectly tailored navy suit, stepped into the Golden Brew Cafe for a quick coffee before her meeting. Little did she know that this visit was about to turn into a nightmare. As soon as she stepped through the door, Jason, the cold-eyed barista, gave her a sarcastic smile. "Oh, are you sure you're in the right place, madam? This isn't really your kind of place." Mark, his colleague behind the counter, burst into a dry laugh. "Yes, we're not used to seeing this type of customer here." The other customers looked away, some uncomfortable, others amused by the scene. Olivia felt a surge of anger, but she took a deep breath, refusing to lose her composure. She knew that reacting impulsively would only make things worse. Jason and Mark continued their provocation. One even commented on her hair, the other on her way of speaking. Olivia remained motionless, her face impassive, but inside, every word registered. She observed the panic and contempt in their eyes, realizing they thought they held all the power. Just when they thought they had completely humiliated her, Olivia pulled her phone from her purse. With icy calm, she dialed a number. "Alexander, I'm in a cafe, right here, and something's going on." Behind the counter, Jason and Mark carried on, unaware of the impending turning point. They didn't know that Alexander Harper, Olivia's husband, was no ordinary businessman. His reputation, wealth, and influence would transform this moment of abuse of power into a painful lesson for them. Olivia put down her phone and, still calm, gave Jason and Mark a silent look. Their arrogant smiles began to waver, without them yet understanding why. A few minutes after Olivia made her call, an unusual tension settled over the cafe. Jason and Mark continued talking, but their voices gradually lost their confidence. The air seemed heavier, as if every word spoken against Olivia came back to haunt them. Then, the cafe door opened with a soft clink. Alexander Harper entered, tall, elegant, and effortlessly imposing. His mere presence silenced the conversations and drew all eyes to him. The two men behind the counter instinctively recoiled. They didn't yet know who he was, but something in his gaze told them they had crossed a line. Alexander walked calmly to the counter. His voice was firm but controlled. "Hello, I'm Alexander Harper. I believe there has been a misunderstanding here concerning my wife." Jason and Mark exchanged a panicked look. They had been so sure of their superiority just minutes before, but now, every second crushed them a little more. Alexander pulled a business card from his pocket and placed it on the counter. "I'm the owner of the company that owns this cafe. I'd like this situation rectified immediately." Olivia, ever calm, smiled slightly. She had kept her composure, and now the tables had turned. Alexander turned to the customers who had witnessed the humiliation. "You saw this behavior? I assure you that this kind of attitude is not tolerated in my establishments." The customers nodded, some relieved, others amused by the dramatic turn of events. Jason tried to speak, stammering out an awkward excuse, but Alexander interrupted him. "No excuses. You will receive comprehensive training on customer respect, and I will ensure that this kind of behavior never happens again." Mark turned completely pale. What he had thought would be a moment of domination and impunity had just turned into an instant nightmare. Power was now entirely in the hands of Olivia and Alexander. Olivia placed a hand on her husband's arm and whispered, "Everything is under control." She smiled inwardly. Their lives hadn't been threatened by this humiliation, but Jason and Mark had just learned a lesson they would never forget. The next morning, the news had spread like wildfire. Several customers who had been there the day before shared the story on social media, along with videos and testimonials. The hashtag #RespectOliviaHarper was starting to go viral. Olivia, calm and composed, followed the situation with a mixture of satisfaction and serenity. She knew that the truth always had the power to spread. Meanwhile, Jason and Mark were desperately trying to limit the damage. The online comments were relentless: criticism, mockery, and calls to boycott their cafe. Reviews on the establishment's page plummeted, and customers were canceling their reservations by the dozens. The two men felt the weight of their arrogance crashing down on them like an avalanche. Alexander, ever the planner, had taken the initiative. He called an emergency meeting with the staff and announced strict measures, mandatory training on respect, immediate sanctions for any discriminatory behavior, and ongoing monitoring. Jason and Mark were suspended, humiliated in front of all their colleagues. For the first time, they felt what it was like to be powerless in the face of justice and truth. But the worst part for them wasn't professional, it was social. Their friends and family, informed by social media, now looked at them with suspicion or mockery. The two men had thought they could humiliate Olivia with impunity, but reality had caught up with them with a force they had never anticipated. Olivia, for her part, continued her life as if nothing had happened. She knew that true power lay in self-control and the ability to transform a negative situation into strength. Her composure, her dignity, and Alexander's support had done more than right the wrong. They had exposed the arrogance and hatred for who they were. This story, which had begun with a simple humiliation, would now serve as a lesson for all those who thought they could abuse their power or their prejudice. Jason and Mark had just learned that a thoughtless action could have devastating consequences, and that some victims never simply suffer in silence. A few days after the incident, the Golden Brew Cafe was at a turning point. The measures taken by Alexander Harper had become an example for all the staff, and management no longer hesitated to sanction any discriminatory behavior. Jason and Mark, still in shock, were called in for a final meeting. Alexander looked them straight in the eyes, his voice calm but firm. "You thought you could humiliate someone and it would go unnoticed. You have disrespected not only my wife, but also everyone who frequents this establishment. You will leave this business with an irreparably tarnished reputation. Take this as a lesson: the power to humiliate belongs to no one." The two men, humiliated and frightened, had nothing more to say. Their stammered apologies were no longer enough to repair the social and professional disaster they had caused. Olivia, who was standing next to her husband, added calmly, "We all have a choice in life, to be cruel or to be worthy. You chose the former, and you will suffer the consequences for a long time." A few weeks later, Jason and Mark's reputation had completely collapsed. Their friends, colleagues, and even their loved ones wanted nothing more to do with them. While Olivia and Alexander continued their lives peacefully, the story of their revenge became an example of dignity and justice throughout the city. But for Olivia, it wasn't about revenge, it was about principles. She had transformed a gratuitous humiliation into a life lesson for those who thought they could profit from hatred or discrimination. Her strength, patience, and self-control had brought down not only the immediate threat but also the arrogance and contempt of two men who had believed themselves above it all. This story will remain etched as a testament. Sometimes, true power lies in calm, respect, and the ability to transform injustice into a silent but brilliant victory.